In this lesson, you'll learn how scientists design, conduct, and evaluate experiments. This is a major part of the GED science test because it checks if you understand the structure of a scientific investigation and how to think critically about its validity. You'll also learn how to identify flaws in experiments, understand variables, and interpret conclusions, all crucial for GED success. Let's begin by understanding what a scientific experiment actually is. A scientific experiment is a controlled method used to test a hypothesis, essentially an educated guess. It involves carefully planning an investigation, making observations, measuring results, and analyzing those results to see how one factor affects another. Now, why do scientists perform experiments? The main purposes are to test hypotheses, to answer questions using observable evidence, and to discover relationships between different variables. By keeping experiments controlled and focused, scientists can draw reliable conclusions based on evidence rather than assumptions. Now that we know what an experiment is, let's walk through the general process scientists follow when designing one. The scientific method is a step-by-step approach used to answer questions and solve problems through observation and evidence. Here's a quick breakdown of the basic steps. First, ask a question. What are you trying to find out? Then, form a hypothesis. Make an educated guess about what you think will happen. Next, design the experiment. Choose your variables and decide how you'll test them. After that, conduct the experiment. Follow the steps and gather your data. Then, analyze the results. This might involve using tables, graphs, or simple math. Once that's done, draw a conclusion. Did the results support your hypothesis? Finally, communicate your results. Share what you discovered. Keep in mind, these steps aren't always followed in a strict order, but GED questions often ask you to identify which step is being described in a scenario. Before you can analyze or design any experiment, it's important to understand the role of variables. Let's break them down clearly. First, we have the independent variable. This is the one factor you change on purpose in an experiment. For example, the amount of sunlight a plant receives. Next is the dependent variable. This is what you measure or observe as a result of the change. For instance, how tall the plant grows. Then there are controlled variables, also called constants. These are the factors you keep the same throughout the experiment to make sure the test is fair. Example, using the same type of plant, same soil, and same amount of water. Lastly, there's the control group, a group in the experiment that does not receive the independent variable. This group serves as a comparison to show whether the independent variable truly had an effect. Understanding these 4 types of variables will help you answer many GED science questions with confidence. To get reliable results in any scientific experiment, you need to design what's called a fair test. This means ensuring that only the independent variable is responsible for changes in the dependent variable. To make that happen, here are a few key practices. Use a large enough sample size so your results aren't based on chance. Repeat the experiment or conduct multiple trials to confirm consistency. Keep all other variables constant to make sure nothing else is affecting the outcome. And most importantly, avoid bias, which could come from influencing results without realizing it or interpreting data in a way that supports your prediction. These steps ensure your test results are trustworthy, and they often show up in GED science questions. Now that you know how to design a fair test, let's take it a step further. How do you know if an experiment is actually valid? In other words, how can you tell if it was done well and produced trustworthy results? A strong experiment usually includes a clear hypothesis that defines what's being tested, controlled variables, so only one thing is changing, reliable data collection methods like accurate measuring tools or consistent timing, repeatability, meaning others can perform the same experiment and get similar results, and most importantly, no bias or flawed reasoning that could distort the outcome. On the flip side, GED test questions might ask you to spot mistakes in an experiment. Watch out for these red flags. A sample size that's too small to represent the larger population. No control group, which means there's no baseline for comparison. Unclear or missing variables, making it hard to what's being tested. A conclusion that doesn't match the data, a common logic error. And a major one, confusing correlation with causation. Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. Being able to evaluate these elements will help you answer many GED science questions with confidence. Once the data has been analyzed, it's time to make sense of it all. This step is called drawing a conclusion, and it's where scientists decide what the results actually mean. Based on the evidence collected, there are usually three possible outcomes. The results support the hypothesis, meaning the prediction was correct. The results do not support the hypothesis, showing the prediction was incorrect. Or the results raise new questions, leading to further investigation. On the GED science test, you might be asked what a conclusion should be based on a set of data. Remember, not supporting a hypothesis is not a failure. It still adds valuable knowledge to science and often helps guide future experiments. Understanding this part of the process helps you spot valid conclusions and rule out ones that go beyond what the data shows. Now that you understand how experiments work, let's look at the kind of questions the GED science test may include. Often, you'll be presented with a brief description of an experiment, a table, chart, or graph showing the data, a summary or conclusion from the experiment. The test will then ask you to analyze one part of the experiment, such as identifying the variables or evaluating the conclusion. Let's try a sample question. Example, GED-style question. A student wants to test if the type of liquid affects plant growth. He uses 3 types of liquids: water, juice, and soda. Each plant gets 100 ml daily, uses the same type of soil, receives the same light, and is measured weekly. Question: what is the independent variable? Answer: the type of liquid. This is what the student changes in the experiment, making it the independent variable. Expect similar questions on test day, where identifying parts of an experiment is key. Let's now walk through a clear method you can use whenever you're asked to analyze an experiment on the GED test. Whether it's a chart, graph, or paragraph, follow these steps. Start with the hypothesis. Ask yourself, what is the experiment trying to find out? Identify the variables. Look for what's being changed, independent, what's being measured, dependent, and what's kept the same, controlled. Check for fairness. Ask, is this a fair test? Are there flaws like missing control groups or inconsistent conditions? Interpret the data. Look at tables, graphs, or charts and ask, what do the results actually show? Evaluate the conclusion. Finally, does the conclusion logically follow from the data? Is there any overreach or assumption? By using this step-by-step approach, you'll be ready to break down experimental questions accurately and confidently on the GED science test. To wrap up, let's go over the most important points from this lesson. A scientific experiment is a structured test of a hypothesis using variables. Know the difference between independent, dependent, and controlled variables. A fair test requires only one changed variable while keeping others the same. Evaluate experiments for flaws, like small sample sizes, missing control groups, or unsupported conclusions. On the GED, you'll likely interpret an experiment setup or analyze a graph, table related to one. Understanding how experiments are designed and evaluated is a core GED science skill. Mastering this gives you a strong edge on the test.